Our vision is to create a more gender balanced workforce in India. So if you wish to know more or join us in our journey, please explore our website, www.xl4w.com. Today, I'm going to help moderate a discussion and a conversation between four very accomplished leaders. Each has a very unique vantage point to the HR function and the CHRO role. My request to all of you as an audience is, as you listen to the discussion, please stay on mute, but use the chat pod to type in your questions and engage with us. We have a producer at our end also supporting us, so we will have time for questions towards the end of the conversation. So please stay engaged, let us know what's on your mind, keep sharing your insights as you listen to these four accomplished leaders as well. I'm going to begin with a round of introductions. Our first panel member is Professor Premarajan. Professor Premarajan is, hi Professor, he works in the area of organizational behavior and human resource management. He's a chairperson of the Center for HRD at XLRI, also faculty representative on the Board of Governors of XLRI, and occupied the chair position of L&T Scholar of HR. Apart from all of these roles, I'm also very grateful for his investment in me as an HR leader, as he was also my professor during my time there. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you.
Our second panel member is Aarif Aziz. Aarif is an experienced HR professional with more than 22 years of industry experience spanning several sectors and geographies. Currently, Aarif leads the HR function at Diageo India and is also part of the executive committee. At Diageo, he is focused on developing talent, organizational capability, and strengthening the organizational culture to deliver business outcomes. But prior to this role, Aarif worked in GE for more than 18 years. And during that period, he assumed several roles with leadership responsibilities across businesses, partnering with teams across Americas, Europe, Asia, Africa. Aarif, what an incredible global exposure.
Thank you, Shabari, and it's a pleasure to be here.
We are delighted to have you. And before we complete Aarif's introduction, may I also share that he holds a postgraduate degree from Symbiosis Center for Management and HRD. We call it SIMBI in Pune, and a bachelor's degree in engineering as well. Welcome once again, Aarif. Our third panel member is Sudha Srinivasan. Sudha is the CEO of the Nudge Center for Social Innovation, a nonprofit on a mission to nudge and nurture top talent to solve India's most critical problems. And since its launch in 2017, the Nudge CSI has incubated 75 nonprofit startups, including 30 tech startups solving problems of poverty. Its $6 million accelerator fund works with high potential nonprofits that are ready for growth and scale. But prior to the Nudge, Sudha worked at Intel, where she spent nearly 13 years in various leadership roles, defining and executing really large-scale global programs. She has great passion for enabling organizations to achieve audacious goals. And as we can see, these goals don't get more audacious than this. Sudha is an engineer by training and holds an MBA from IIM Lucknow. Sudha is also always on the move, as happens to be right now as well. So Sudha, let's see whether we can get you on your video too. Welcome, Sudha. Okay, so maybe Sudha will be able to turn her video on soon. Sudha, if your audio is working okay, would you like to say hello?
Hello. Nice to meet everyone.
Thank you. Sudha, you represent our lives today. Yeah. I'd also like to share our fourth panel member and introduce Rahul Gautam. Rahul is a CHRO turned entrepreneur with a passion to unleash potential of professionals and organizations around this new world of work. He has over 20 years of experience in a range of leadership roles and industries, spanning MNCs, large Indian enterprises, and consulting firms, managing some transformational change at the helm. He's also a proud alumnus of XLRI and worked in HR leadership roles with PI Industries, CK Birla Hospital for Women, and Avtech as CHRO. What drives him is scale and impact, and he believes that education empowers knowledge and growth. He is the partner and president for Leadup Universe, whose aim is to unleash the potential of global universities and aspiring professionals in the executive education space. Welcome, Rahul.
Thank you. Lovely to be here. Good morning, everyone.
And helping us with our discussion today is my team member, Jayashree Marakini, a very able producer. Jayashree is also an alumnus of XLRI, batch of 99, an accomplished consultant and an executive coach. She's going to keep an eye on all the questions, insights that you have, that you will be typing into the chat pod as you listen to the panel. But let's first get a sense of the audience. I'm sure my panel members would want to get a sense of who's in the room. So my question to all of you is, give me a +1 in the chat pod if you are associated with the HR function in any way, maybe as an HR leader, an executive, maybe a consultant, a coach. You work very closely with the HR function. And Jayashree, give us a sense of how many people really have a very key stake and important role to play in today's conversation as an audience member as well. Okay, lots of +1s going off, I'm sure. Oh. Excellent. So for my panel members, you can see we have a very invested audience here. I'm going to begin, Aarif, if I can put the spotlight on you first and ask you a question. We know that this pandemic has forever changed the world of work. And from your vantage point as a CHRO, after almost 18 months of this crisis, if you could share, what are some new trends that you're seeing today? And what are the implications for CHROs, both people who are currently in the role or in the function, and of course, future CHROs as well?
Shabari, thank you. It's a great question, actually. And I must say the learning continues. Every day comes with a new insight and learning. But let me share a couple of themes which have been at the top of our mind and wasn't a surprise. But when you see data and trends kind of reflecting those insights, it's heartening and you can connect to it a lot better. So one of the things which all of us have heard is employee wellness is becoming more and more important. And employee wellness, how you take care of people, the program, support system you have is very important. But the insight which I want to share quickly with you is that when we did a global annual survey, employee survey across different regions and markets, one of the things we realized was that correlation to employee engagement was the highest with how the company supported and focused on wellness. So wellness correlating to engagement and becoming the most important driver of engagement is has been I wouldn't say aha, but a validation of what we are seeing in the market. And this is what you would hear across the industry. Second, which was an interesting one, and all of us have always talked about work-life balance and how we manage personal and professional space. But honestly, during this pandemic, the personal space kind of converged with the professional space. And I think we realized that life takes precedence over everything else. And which basically means how you set up your organizations, how you build your people leaders to really connect, engage with employees, at the same time provide opportunities for learning and growth in a very different way. And realizing that people are people and they're humans first, than just playing a role in the organization. I think that's become so important and relevant across the world. It was always relevant and more in front in India, but I think it's become more and more relevant across the world. Last thing which I would say is that everyone is talking about a future of work. And my view on this is, yes, future of work will always be there because future doesn't tell you what is in store for us. But I think what is important is realizing that technology is an enabler and it will create a space for you to get work done in a different way. But at the same time, social connections and how you bring people together is also extremely important. So for HR as a function, it's about realizing where technology can play a role and leveraging it, while at the same time, how do you really focus in building social connections in the organization, because that will lead to innovation, that will lead to success. So I think that balance is the other thing which is becoming more and more important. I'll hand over back to you, Shiv.
Thank you. And Aarif, if I can ask you a follow-up question. Yeah, how at Diageo, you've shared some three very valid points. A couple of years ago, none of us would have thought that wellness now is a responsibility of the organization as well. So, but how at Diageo have you been navigating this specifically and preparing the organizational setup, leaders for this future of work?
So I think there are lots of things, Shabari, but maybe just share 3-4 top highlights. You know, we always think that in an organization, if you have to support people, you've got to have policies and structures helping people navigate this. What we realized that, you know, when you create policies and frameworks, you are actually boxing the problem. Unfortunately, we are in a situation where you can't box the problem. The problem keeps changing over a period of time, and it's going to be different than what it is today. So what you need to do is create enough guidelines, but more importantly, empower your frontline leaders to take right decisions and to really help. So one of the things which we have done is we've thrown away our policies. So today, and in fact, we just this exercise very recently, we used to have 26 HR policies. It has been now curtailed down to 6. The 6 policies are the ones where we really want people to adhere to, safety guidelines and so on. But everything else is principles and guidelines and empowerment to line managers and frontline leaders, HR teams to take right decisions. So I think that's the first one, that, you know, don't try to box the problem, empower your leadership and your HR teams to take right decisions with principles and philosophy. Second thing, which I think we have done differently than what we have ever done in past, is create the right informal connections for your frontline leadership as well as your topmost leadership to connect and engage with employees. We have done away with quarterly town halls. We have 15-minute catch-up with employees on a lot more frequent basis, which is not just about updates, but hearing them and having a lot more two-way communication and role modeling the values you want to stand. So imagine our chief commercial officer coming into the meeting and saying, guys, don't call me before 10 o'clock. And he has the largest team, sales team spread across the country, because I need to help my wife take care of personal course at home. So creating more informal ways of connect, making your leaders as role models on the values you want to percolate in the company, and just changing the narrative in the organization. I'm going to stop here, Shabari, because the conversation will continue.
Wow, I know we can keep deepening it and we will come back to this, which is so true. I love the word that you use. The whole philosophy has changed. Yeah, thank you for that, Aarif. Sudha, can I put the spotlight on you and bring you into this conversation?
Yes.
First, I'm sure you have an interesting story behind the name, the Nudge Foundation. You've probably been asked this question before as well. Tell us what's prompted or what's the story behind the name?
Yeah, so there's a story behind the name and the logo as well, which is a /.
Yes.
Intended to be a small positive force in the lives of India's most underprivileged, that puts them on a pathway out of poverty. The force cannot push them out of poverty. It is they have to take over the agency over their life outcomes and build their own pathways. But a small external force can bring into play access, a sense of aspiration, show the means through which youth, particularly from underprivileged backgrounds, can do things that will make them part of the larger India growth story and part of the formal economy, achieve prosperity that the rest of us have achieved in our lifetimes.
Very inspiring, Sudha. And I know that you've straddled both worlds in the
Right.
corporate sector and, of course, the social development sector as
Right.
well. But if I were to ask you to start maybe in this current role, tell us a little bit about the social development sector and this role specifically of HR today,
Right.
and what you expect it to be in the future.
Right. So as you can imagine, the social sector is not particularly competitive in the marketplace for talent. For the size of problems of poverty, I don't know if you've had your eye on the stats, but as India climbed up the GDP rankings, we probably now rank number 5 or 6, right? And that number keeps changing because of just the turbulence of the pandemic, but we are there in the top 5 or 6. Our human development index puts us at rank 130 plus, right? If you were to take India's most underserved 10 states and kind of remove the law of averages, brought about by the more prosperous states, our bottom 10 states would be in the bottom 5 worldwide. That is how abject poverty in India is. And we don't realize it in our silos of relative privilege and urban opulence. The sector needs far more talent than it is able to attract today. It is a sector that does not reward very well on compensation. So you have to, as an HR professional, be really creative in terms of how do you build the brand for the sector for what it actually is. It's a very opaque sector and not really visible from the outside. A technologist, for instance, cannot readily see how their skills and capabilities might help to alleviate poverty per se. But if you kind of peel that onion a little bit, the fact today is that India need not wait for trickle-down economics to come into play and for the poor to be able to access technology, products and services that the middle class and above are able to access through a 10-year, 20-year long process of trickle-down. It could happen today, here and now. How then do you bring the IoT engineer to come and solve for hygiene in toilets and slums, or the drone engineer to come and solve for the fact that Arunachal Pradesh or a remote part of the country could actually receive medication and other essentials of life using that technology. So it's a very, very fun space to be. Actually, it's an amazing challenge to show the opportunities for intellectual contribution, for innovation in a sector that has traditionally been seen as that for activists and perhaps not mainstream to the extent that it ought to be. So talent acquisition in the development sector is a particularly challenging area. Subsequently, every other area in terms of building up intrinsic motivations, appealing to the millennial and the Gen Z to kind of approach purpose as well as material returns from a career in tandem, right? And kind of see how both can be achieved and your skills can be put for larger betterment of society. All of these are amazing HR challenges. It's a particularly fun sector for an HR professional.
Yeah. So interesting, you use the word fun. In my work, when I meet with a lot of the leaders, especially at mid-level career
Right.
roles, very often people are searching for that sense of purpose that you spoke about, and that
Right.
sense of challenge to solve what you're calling as some extremely wicked problems.
Right.
If you were a future CHRO, what would be your maybe your call to action or way to invite people to explore this?
Yeah. So I think it's a little bit of Maslow's hierarchy at play. As India has become prosperous in the last 10, 15 years, rapidly since liberalization actually, professionals are seeking purpose in their careers a lot more aggressively than ever before. There's a lot of been there, done that for professionals in my age group, right? 35 to 50. Younger Indians are choosing the sector earlier in life because they are sorted financially, even as they are starting out their careers. Right? And this is also a generation that stands to inherit far more wealth than any other Indian generation in the past, right? So there's a lot of cognizance of that as well. So a CHRO in the space really has to unlock other levers required for the core business of a non-profit, which is to deliver impact. Other levers like philanthropic capital, political will, public attention to social problems and the solutions that they are setting out to deliver. As a core CXO with seat at the table, right? So you're thinking business very deeply. HR is no longer a support function or an enabling function for core business. It is a very vital part of the design of the sector itself and the design of most models for change that nonprofits are kicking off. If you look at the Pratham story or the Akshay Patra story or even the Nudge, you kind of see that talent to the sector bringing in a certain predictability to delivering the outcomes that you're setting out to, using human capital is really, really core, and it's very front and center for the CHRO. As much as I know I'm painting the rosy picture, but a CHRO in this field also needs to rationalize expectations and help people get over the rosy-eyed period quickly. Because at the end of the day, it is very demanding work, emotionally demanding as well as physically. And a lot of the wellness that Aarif mentioned, taking care of self before taking care of others, and a lot of other principles that are so core to HR professionals. I'm not one, and hence I fumble around this a little bit.
Sure.
But I would certainly expect our CHRO to have a very sharp lens on that and to continuously upgrade their own skill sets. Like the world around us is changing so rapidly. CHROs need to stay current with their own repertoire and toolkit to be meaningfully contributing to the business.
Yeah. Thank you, Sudha. And I'm sure there are many questions that will come up for you as well from the audience. Thank you for raising this spotlight on a very different expectation as well. And not just your sector, but I think a lot of what you shared is relevant for across sectors. If I can bring Professor Premarajan, if I can bring you into the conversation, you've heard, you represent XLRI, which has been well known as a business school that has helped bring together so many HR professionals, honed CHROs across the world. Two questions that I have for you is that today, XLRI recently has announced a very high-end postgraduate program targeted to prepare future CHROs. So if you could throw the light a little bit on what's prompted XLRI to announce this new program and how will it likely meet the needs that Aarif and Sudha have spoken about and have triggered as potential capabilities required from the function in the future. Professor Premarajan, we'll need you to.
Yeah. Thank you, Shabari, and good morning to everyone. Delighted to be here. In terms of the question, I think you are specifically asking about the new program that we recently decided to launch. And so in a sense of the word, I think I would call this a program a pandemic's child kind of coinage. Fine. If you look at how the pandemic has affected the HR function, I think there is a general agreement that it has given voice and influence to the CHROs like never before. In a sense, if you look at it, they were called upon to act with agility, flexibility, and speed. And when you pause and reflect briefly, because the pandemic is still raging, but I am of the view that as a professional group so far, HR leaders have done well. And in many organizations, I would go to the extent of saying that their stock has increased substantially in the eyes of the seniors as well as their colleagues. In short, what I'm trying to say is the function has become one of the single most important functions for any organization in this unprecedented times. Now that many organizations have started shifting and putting the workplace back together in probably varying forms and shapes, the organizations, needless to say, are increasingly dependent on the expertise and flexibility of HR towards shaping the workplace recovery, so to say. And in all, in a sense, I feel there is a broad consensus that the organizations must reimagine how they foster talent, deliver services, etc., through a forward-thinking HR strategy. In short, how HR delivers the most compelling work experience. Now, responding to these challenges, as you would agree, is not easy, right? And several organizations are seriously handicapped due to this mismatch between this requirement and the availability of quality talent in HR, particularly at the senior levels. And this has made, naturally, the task of recovery even more daunting. As a leading HR institute in the country, we at XLRI, we felt there is a need to design and deliver a program which supports talent building at senior levels of HR function. And what is the vision? The vision to create a global program, a truly global program for HR managers to, let us say, help or accelerate their growth to the C-suite. While I'm not denying the fact that there could be other programs in the same space with somewhat similar objective of training future CHROs, this is designed as a unique program, as a high-end program, keeping in mind the real challenges for developing senior talent in HR. We have tried to use an approach which broadly we call it as academically originated, practitioner enriched, and CEO validated kind of a design. So that is what probably has been the genesis of this program. And when we look at some of those points, whether Aarif or Sudha spoke about, I think the responsibility of HR, whether it is in terms of engagement and what Aarif talked about as that interesting study, which showed a correlation between the focus on wellness and employee engagement. So naturally, HR's role in terms of the focus on well-being, the focus critically, I would say, on employee experience, on technology, and what we all have been talking all this while in terms of HR focus on business. All this would certainly be the focus of this program, which are some of those issues that Aarif have spoken about. So that is what I think is the genesis and how some of those issues are getting addressed in this program. So back to you, Shabari.
Thank you, Professor. In fact, I'm glad you used the word the global program, because if there's one thing, and the pandemic style, if there's one thing that the pandemic has taught us, is that it's obliterated boundaries and diminished what the CHROs are challenged by in another geography is fairly similar to CHROs being challenged across in other geographies as well. And we've got to stop seeing it as very country-specific challenges as well. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
I'm going to bring in our fourth panel member, Rahul Gautam in. Rahul, you've heard the perspectives from others. You've also had fabulous experience as a CHRO in the industry. And in your own words, you're passionate about making a difference to the world of CXO education. I know in our conversations, you've talked about your dream and the dream behind Leadup Universe, the dream that has fueled the creation of this postgraduate program for CHROs. If you could share a little bit about what did you hear? Professor Premarajan talked about it being validated by CXOs. What have you been hearing from the industry, from CXO leaders about putting the spotlight on building CHRO talent for the future?
So we kind of reached out to, over the last few years, we've built a very good network of almost about 100 to 200 good CXOs where we have very deep relationships. And we felt that can we build something which is like a bridge program where the best academic inputs from a great institution like XLRI, bringing in top academicians from all over the world, and also the practitioners coming together. And ultimately, the CEO is the person who validates everything because it's the key stakeholder to the CHRO or any leader's role. Can we bring something together like that? And that was the genesis of the idea of really partnering with Excel around this kind of a thing. So 3 or 4 themes, Shabari, which came out very clearly, when kind of we did deep conversations with the CXOs. The context is fundamentally shifting, in many sides. Aarif talked about the need for wellness. In fact, there was a study done by HBR talking about the 25 new jobs that are going to get created within the HR function, and one of them was Chief Wellness Officer. Sudha talked about purpose, and one of the jobs was about the Chief Purpose Officer. Okay, so very interesting. All these things that we felt were 5 or 10 years away, or something which is, maybe will it be real or not, is actually hitting us today. So the context has changed. Business models massively disrupted. Digitization is going at a breakneck speed. Not only globalization, also localization, inclusion, unleashing talent. All these pieces are hitting businesses from all sides. And the vision was, can we do something with the top academic institutions around unleashing the potential? And the Leadup dream came there, in terms of UNP is not Uttar Pradesh, it's not another project of Yogi Adityanath. It is basically UNP stands for Unleashing Potential, which is about really can we unleash potential, and the universe stands for the bigness of the whole thing. So can we really bring it? So 3 or 4 things that came from the CXOs. First is the business savviness in the CHRO. And this, while it has stayed in the last 20 years, I think it keeps getting more and more intense. And just to give you an example, I mean, one of the CHROs, when the newly turned CHRO went into a board meeting, and the board member first asked him, so how do you, what kind of an org structure are you building, org design are you building in the next 2 years, which will bring your manpower cost per sales down by 10%? And this was like a bomb hit question on the first board meeting for a new CHRO. Similarly, there was a CEO who told us that I asked my HR head that why are you choosing 7% over 5% as increments for this year? And the lame reply was more in terms of, oh, my people will go away. Whereas what the CEO was looking at was, give me productivity metrics, give me figures, give me cost, give me people cost at a very, very granular level. Look at all ways in which you can look at getting gigs in, multiple ways in which we can build the structure and bring the cost down. So the business savviness becomes a very, very intense. The other day, Dr. Premarajan and myself, we were having a chat with Dr. Wayne Brockbank, and we said, what's going to change post-pandemic? And one of the things very interestingly he said was, the fundamentals won't change. The business continues to be at the center. The customer continues to be at the center. So we should not lose that. Within the business piece, also some examples, the promoter of a setup says, we have to move from a fine chemicals business to a pharma business. How quickly can you get me a CEO of a pharma business? As a CHRO, now you don't know that business. You need to quickly understand that business, and you can't just say, okay, I'll hire a headhunter who will get in that kind of a person. So a lot of these pieces are real practical things that are thrown by the board, by the CEOs and the CXOs. The second key piece is about building credibility with the CEO and the leadership team. To me, this is really the big one. And credibility is about balancing these multiple conflicting priorities. It's a very tricky role. It's a tightrope walk that one has to do as an HR head all the time. And there's a lot of influence and personal credibility that goes into the entire thing. And one of the things I've heard many CXOs say is that while HR people keep talking about bring the cost down, let's build a performance-oriented culture, but what's the performance-oriented culture within the HR function? There, you kind of come back when somebody throws a problem at you, you kind of say, chalta hai sir, kal dekh lenge, ho jayega. These things people don't want to hear. The CXOs don't want to hear these things. So the whole idea is, can you model the change within your own function first? Can you really build a cost-efficient structure within the HR function? How are you managing your own cost pieces? And more importantly, building allies and advocates to navigate through political environments. These are very, very tricky and practical pieces that any HR leader needs to do. One of the HR leaders told us that the person did an organization network analysis, and there they found out that the org structure which was there on paper and really the informal structure were absolutely different. And how do you navigate that kind of an environment? The third key piece we heard from the CXOs is about doing the tightrope walks. And there's a massive work that's there, and it's a lot about your own self-mastery, holding your nerve. The promoter, are you a promoter's his master voice or a her master voice? Or do you hold your own ground? Are you able to hold your own nerve in tough situations? Can you confront the CEO with uncomfortable truths? There's a business leader who is a very toxic leader, but produces excellent results. What is your role as an HR leader to deal with that kind of a situation? If there is a non-performing CEO and you're working with the promoter setup, the promoter tells you, get me a new CEO. Now you're reporting into that person. How do you manage and navigate these tightrope walks? These are very, very real situations and very practical situations hitting our HR leaders on a daily basis. Also, the fourth piece is about digitization and strategic foresight is something that we heard from the CXO. And this is something which has 2 or 3 pieces to it. One is, as I said, the whole change, it's not about future of work, it's actually current work now. The future is here, it's already here. So the first thing is the way the artificial intelligence, machine learning, everything hitting us in a very, very sharp way. Half of the factories of Amazon today are managed by robots. It's not just about hybrid working. The HR leaders need to manage hybrid workforce. You need to, one of the new roles that was stopped in the HBR study was a man-machine manager or a woman-machine manager. Very interesting. So these things, while we used to feel they are more theoretical concepts, are all practical and they are coming and hitting us. And then the piece around diversity, which is not just about gender diversity, but about really fueling innovation in the organization. Today, we run a company which is half of it is run through gigs. They're smart people working from all over. They come in and they pull in their talents. And finally, as an HR person, do you have the growth mindset or you're really fixed? Are you ready to learn for your mistakes, quickly learn, relearn, take feedback, take criticism, move on those kind of things? So fundamentally, we saw these are the pieces which we have observed coming in from the CXO community. And one piece was today, there was no program which was trying to touch upon these aspects. And with Dr. Premarajan's guidance, we said that can we get the best of the academic world, which is really not just the flavor of the month research, which happens, or the flavor of the quarter, but some good empirical research coming in with these practitioners together who mentor, who kind of co-facilitate sessions and give these insights which can really, kind of create the next generation of students.
Thank you, Rahul. Thank you so much for painting the landscape and also bringing in the CXO voice and the expectations, highlighting what are some of the gaps that people see. I'm going to turn it back to some of our panel members. You've heard, you've heard each other. There are some perspectives. I'm sure something's been triggered and an additional perspective that you may wish to add and may wish to, before I move to audience questions. So over to all of you, I mean, Aarif, Sudha, Professor Premarajan, is there anything that you would like to bring in that's been triggered as you heard each other?
You know, one of the points which Rahul just now mentioned about this managing hybrid workforce, right? It's not just hybrid workforce, but how do you really manage? I think that's the biggest challenge which we are going to face. It's one, understanding where you use tools, technologies. It's second, how do you really help your leadership to be able to deal with it? But more importantly, as an HR function, how do you stay ahead of the curve and really see what trends are going to come, and how do I rewire, reskill my workforce? How do I redesign my organization structures, which may not have any meaning anymore, right? We are now talking about group of people coming together and then really solving for a problem. How do you really recognize, reward in a situation like this? We all have been wired with job catalogs and job descriptions. All that needs to change, and which basically means that our systems and programs and what we deliver has to be a lot more flexible. We should be open to Rahul's point, learn on the go and change, but at the same time create an environment which is still engaging and which is enriching for people. Because if you don't, and it's all about chaos, then you're also not helping the purpose. So I think the biggest challenge in the coming few years is for our function on how we help organizations reshape with what is expected in the external world. So great point, Rahul.
Before I turn over to some of the other panel members, Aarif, to take this point a little further, there's a question that's been posed to you as well. You've talked about enrichment, etc. One of our audience members has sent this questions to you, which is, how do you channel that sense of purpose in your employees to get them to also make a social contribution? Can that be harnessed in some way to reflect a certain joy of doing as part of work?
It's a great question. I don't have all the recipes. I'll share a story with you guys, a quick story. So when this entire pandemic started and we are in the business of making spirits, we realized that, we had to close all our manufacturing. And one of the important ingredients for our spirits is ethyl neutral alcohol. ENA is what we call it. That was lying in our plants. And it's a little dangerous if you're going to close your plants for 4 months and have ENA lying there, because it can actually lead to, it's fire hazard and lots of other challenges and so on. While we were just thinking about it, a group of our employees came, and these were like workers in the factories, people on the shop floor, came and said, sir, there is a huge shortage of hand sanitizers. Why don't we repurpose this ENA, which is a significant ingredient to make hand sanitizers, and really make hand sanitizers for the community? And, like organizations, right? We need to lay out a process. We need to have quality standards, certifications, large MNC company. And as leadership team, we kind of got really worried. And then we said, when we start the plant, we'll have to rewire the lines again. And I think there came a moment of just realizing, why not we let go and let people drive it? Honestly, we completely let go of that decision and empowered the team. The only thing we created was every morning, 5 minutes huddle to ask them, do you need any help? From the concept to the first bottle of hand sanitizer coming out, it was 5 days. And this is amidst lockdown. We got all the certifications, we got everything closed, process done, quality checks done, and the bottle of hand sanitizer was out. And so the reason I wanted to share this story, I think you've got to create an environment in the organization where you are empowering people. When you do that, purpose will come to life. People will create an opportunity to make things happen. And I can't tell you how much of a goodwill it created when the entire country was struggling for us to be able to, in 5 days, get the first bottle out and then produce hundreds and thousands of liters of sanitizer.
Wow. And we're seeing comments in the chat board about just the appreciation for the quick turnaround. And Aarif, in that anecdote, I also heard a reference to what you said earlier, which is let go of all of those policies and unbox, right? And you'll look at the philosophy and offer a guideline. Thank you. Sudha, there's a question for you. And so before I ask you the question, any additional perspective that you would like to share based on what you heard from your other panel colleagues.
So have to say, big round of applause for that story, Aarif. I mean, just so inspiring. I know we've all grown up reading books like When Elephants Dance, right? There's this whole notion that startups can be nimble and agile. You have to be a small team in order to respond to a crisis in a 5-day kind of window. But here's demonstration of a large organization with a flow rate and a base that, it's not very easy to even make a 5-degree change to the direction in which you're going. But that's the reality of today, right? With the technology that's at our disposal, be it social media tools for teams to communicate and collaborate, or large-scale enterprise ERPs that are also modular and nimble and agile. There's a huge technology backbone enabling elephants to dance. There is mindset, right? I think people coming into the workforce have the desire to have that very strong sense for bias for action and movement, which HR needs to.
Sudha may be experiencing a little bit of a technical glitch out there. So we will come back to her the moment she's able to dial back in. Professor Premarajan, any additional perspective that you would like to share, which you heard from your other panel colleagues?
Yeah, those important perspectives that are coming from the practitioners. We have the CXO or the CHRO's perspective and the CEO's perspective, and we have an entrepreneur's perspective. Fine, all those things, actually, there is a lot of points of convergence. Fine, so understanding the importance of learning. I think I'm here to represent that segment in terms of why is it important, why learning is continuous. Fine, so in that perspective, I think the kind of qualities that we are talking about that needs to be unleashed, and where education in whichever models or whichever modules it come, it would be much more, what would I say, modular kind of programs. That would be the order of the day, and much more customized. So what I'm trying to say is that the emphasis on creating this career with that protean mindset, where every employee has a feeling of his or her potential to get unleashed, and how education with this modular format, how it can help for every employee to realize their hidden potential, talent, etc., and how HR is supporting that in a customized way. I think that, to me, that developmental focus to me would be very important, which is very flexible for everyone, and the customization is the order of the day. So how educational institutes also respond to that challenge in terms of, though we say that there is monetizing the knowledge that is there, that somehow it's a very crass way of putting it, though, but I feel that educational institutions also need to respond to that challenge and work together to unleash this potential.
Thank you, Professor, because like you said, everyone's talking about the environment we have to create. We've got to learn how to be able to do that as well. I'm going to switch attention back to Sudha, who I believe is back with us. Sudha, I know you can't turn your video on, but if you could just share with us, is your audio working okay? Because we do.
My audio is fine. I think it's a bad connection that keeps bumping me out of the session. So let me kind of stay on video off for a while.
As long as you know that we've all experienced this in these last 18 months. So we have a question for you from the audience, and it says, we usually see, and I think it's something that you talked about as well, which is not just mid-career, but I'll read out the question for you. We usually see a lot of mid-career professionals switching to the social sector, like you talked about, but how do we enable more young folks to see this sector as an important sector to join?
Right. I think it's pumping me off again.
We can hear you, Sudha.
Yeah. You can? Okay, very good. There's a short-term answer and a better answer over the longer term, which I hope unfolds as we hope it would. In the long term, I hope the barriers that exist to attract talent to the sector today come down, right? In the sense that the sector is able to afford talent at compensation and wages which, if not competitive, are viable. Um, and I hope funding for non-profit work increases uh, to even support ancillary functions, to build sector infrastructure that is required beyond just the core delivery of products and programs. So that's all in the horizon, and I hope we get to it, not in 10 years, but in the next 3 or 4, with just the attention that the pandemic has brought to social issues. There needs to be an acceleration. I hope we see that. In the short term, I think young people joining the sector are hugely incentivized by the emergence of academic programs, right? It's actually hugely honorable to have in your application to a international Ivy League institution, or perhaps even at XLRI, just to be able to say that you have chosen the path of social good and created public good over just lucrative challenges and seeking personal gratification, right? So I think that's a huge signal from the academic world. It prepares you for serious programs in developmental economics, social sciences. It also prepares you for a very well-rounded personality that comes in handy irrespective of which sector you choose beyond that. Right? So for a young professional, I think that's hugely valuable. Back to the topic of human resources though, right? I think for HR professionals in the development sector and elsewhere, the key point to take note of is that young people are seeking purpose far earlier in their careers. And that any job, irrespective of what sector it is in, needs to have that component deeply baked into it. And if organizations can plan for that, even interventions like CSR activities can become like hugely meaningful and a powerful tool through which to engage the young workforce.
Yeah. Thank you, Sudha. And we are with you in terms of, we hope that some of these really barriers, as you say, are overcome in the shorter term versus in the longer term, like you talk about. There's another question that's come in, and maybe I'll open it out to everybody before we also invite some closing comments. Any insight on how we can creatively attack and set right this war for talent that seems to, it's been around for a long time. This term is not new to us. But how, any new insights for this one, for HR to scale up the organizational capability as well? Any thoughts from any of you?
Maybe just a couple of thoughts, Shabari. One is, I really think that we spend a lot more time in buying talent as companies than building talent. And while the philosophy has always been there that we need to grow and develop, and there are learning programs, there are multiple interventions, but I think there is a significant opportunity for us to bring in employees' perspective into this entire conversation as well. It has to be employee driven and organization enabled versus other way around. So I think that's one big variance, because if you bring that variance and you help individuals fulfill their dreams and aspirations, then you can completely change the game. So that's one thing which I would say. The other thing which I would say is that most of the times our traditional approaches, and I am part of it, I'm not saying that everyone does it, others do it. I have also done. You know, want to develop someone, let's create a training intervention for high-pot people and so on. Let's get a bunch of them in a room and go through influencing skills workshop and so on.
I have a job because of that, Aarif. Thank you.
Those are important, so don't get me wrong, they are important, but they are not the only ones. You've got to really create opportunities for people to have blended learning, opportunities for people to have the right level of exposure, which is not easily created because we are stuck by organizational structures, funding models, as to who can work where. And I think unless we disrupt those opportunities and create the right flexibility in the organization, development will not be holistic. I would just say there are many other possibilities, but two things which came top of my mind.
Fabulous. Thank you for that. Rahul, your perspective, anything to add on how do we just help organizations build this capability?
Yeah, and I'm actually marrying this thought with also what Dr. Premarajan talked about learning. And I feel that so this is really the time to invest in one's learning, and all of us are doing that. See how quickly we all learn the technology aspect, so many different ways in which the human mind is so flexible and the requirement is very huge today. When I'm talking to the boards, they are saying the expectation out of the CXOs today is very, very high. The capability gap is also very high. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And 4 or 5 things which are important is, one is, mentoring, and these are very important things. I remember my first instance where one of my promoters who was working with a CEO who was not performing for 10 years. And he said, Rahul, I want a new CEO on board. And I was just bombed, this kind of a problem comes at you. I picked up a phone and talked to one of my mentors, and I got some really, really good advice on how to manage this piece. So the whole piece around mentoring is very important. So it's good to have mentors. Second is crucible experiences. All of us are going through those experiences, and I think that's really the gold of the learning. So if you're going through the pain, I think all of us, one personal thing which I've tried to imbibe is be comfortable being uncomfortable, constantly. It's okay. And these crucible experiences, for example, there was a CHRO who had told me that within 1 month, the person was expected to work with a new CEO and get a new leadership team on board. Now, this is a crucible kind of an experience. It's not an easy experience to do, but these are really the goals. The third is, if we want to, really learn, build a good peer network, build about 40, 50 good people in your peer network can be, really looking at that. And fourth is self-reflection. Sometimes it's good to just take a pause, interestingly, when we were looking at some of the students who started to sign up for this particular program that Dr. Premarajan and XLRI is conceptualizing, the one key thing is they said they wanted to take a little pause and see where is their career headed. And it's good to take a pause, go back into your inner structures. What's really missing? How do I, really create and catapult a different kind of a value and unleash that? So these are the 3-4 things which I feel can really expand your capability.
So
thank you.
Probably I would just like to add, it's not a new point, but I'm glad that Aarif spoke about it, in the sense that a simple approach of letting the individual, craft one's career or whatever the craft one's experience in the organization and provide the necessary support to realize one's, as I kept on saying, that the pro-TM career orientation is nothing but that. Fine, you allow the individual to sort of create one's career experience, and whether it is job crafting, but many of the organizations still put hurdles, even if they have systems around that to help realize employees, their potential, etc. But there is this caginess about the whole thing. I keep talking about in my class on job posting. It's such a simple technique, fine, where employees, once they realize here is their vacancy, here is an opening which might suit me, but then you have too many hurdles, too many restrictions. You must first take your boss's permission. Fine, you must get that boss's permission. So all those processes are killing a very good example of a simple intervention which is aimed at helping employees realize their potential. So therefore, truly believe in that, then all these hurdles or constraints or restrictions might on its own might move away. So I think that is what is needed. Let the employees decide to design their career experience. I think that is the key thing I would like to emphasize here.
Thank you so much, Professor. And I know that we can deepen the conversation and discussion even more. I'm also conscious of that we're at the end of our panel discussion. If I can just invite Sudha as well to make a closing comment. For others, just hang on for another minute while we hear Sudha too.
Thank you. Yes, so big +1 on the need to upgrade skills. Today, a talent acquisition professional that does not understand digital marketing is bound to struggle. A culture specialist that does not understand the mindset of the millennial is bound to struggle. Understanding technology, the core of it, and how it can enable people processes in any organization is a must-have capability. The world and the way it functions has also changed, right? To the earlier point on mentoring, mentoring is hugely popular. Mentoring programs are not, right? Because mentoring programs come with a mindset of process design. But what the world has moved to is platforms of discovery, right? Very different ways to accomplish objectives than were used to solve last generation's problems. So huge +1 on the need for HR professionals to go back to school, even if it is part-time, leverage programs that make the skill set contemporary while bringing out the best of the lifelong experience of an HR professional and their emotional intelligence and just the ability to think through problems. So,
thank you. Thank you so much, Sudha, for this amazing panel discussion. Thank you, everybody, for bringing in your unique perspective. We also have a Google form that Jayashree is putting as a link in the chat pod. If any of you are interested to know more, connect with either of our members here to know more about how you can invest in your learning, or you wish to reach out to us, please just complete the Google form and we will be in touch. Aarif, Sudha, Professor Premarajan, and Rahul, thank you so much for taking so much of yourselves. Enjoy the discussion.
lovely being here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye.
Little bit there.
Thank you.
Couldn't even understand. I thought the needle here was longer.
I'm sure the needle is longer. So Jayashree, if you could type in, if you would put in the Google form as well, for anyone who wishes to connect and know more.
Yeah, the Google form is on the chat, and I would love to partner with all of you or answer more queries on the program. And we would love your support for XL4W.
Thank you, Jayashree.
Thank you, everyone.